Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed.
And you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film podcast, and my name is Christian Taylor, and thank you for clicking on today's episode. And I'm very excited because we're going to be talking about a film franchise that I hold very dear to my heart, and I've been watching movies from this franchise since I was a little kid. And the movie, of course, we will be discussing today is Ghostbusters Afterlife, because the Ghostbusters hype is now through the roof with the release of Afterlife's sequel called Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which is currently going to be hitting theaters this coming weekend, and it's actually out today. And my family and I are planning on going to see Frozen Empire this Sunday, and I'm going to be covering that movie next as soon as possible, because it's been a while since I've gotten the opportunity to cover a film currently in theaters, so expect that as the topic for my next episode. But just want to start by saying, I hope you are having a very excellent day. It's a beautiful weekend here in Illinois, and nothing like spending a good Friday afternoon recording a nice new podcast recording in my bedroom. And I don't have an actual equipment studio for this, so it's literally just me with a couple of microphones, my good computer, and good old Adobe Audition. That's all I have. If my voice does get a little echoey sometimes, I do apologize. I do really wish that I could do this in a nice little smaller room that's kind of soundproof, but if my voice echoes a little bit, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I'm super excited for today's episode. So, my history with Ghostbusters. So, for anyone who's been listening to my show for a while now, you'll know that I'm a big Ghostbusters fan. I was actually talking to a couple of friends of mine today. I was just telling them, that my parents legit raised me like an 80s kid. My favorite movies growing up were Indiana Jones, Star Wars, the Ghostbuster movies, the Blues Brothers, Breakfast Club, The Adventures of Babysitting, the Back to the Future movies, just to name a few. I watched a lot of 80s movies growing up, and I watched Ghostbusters 1 and 2 religiously growing up, and I loved both of them a lot. The first one is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the original Ghostbusters from 1984, and it's so crazy to think that these movies, that the first film is 40 years old this year. Time flies. But I actually do have a lot of history with Ghostbusters. I actually own an actual used drawing from one of the episodes of Ghostbusters, the animated series, which ran from 1986 to 1991. It was a big hit TV show, and I bought it at the 2022 St. Louis Comic-Con. It was sadly the last one because St. Louis has shut down that convention. Still heartbroken about it. But I got to go to the last one back in 2022, and there was a booth selling sketched drawings that were used in animated films, cartoons, and I bought me a piece of paper that had the Ghostbusters animated series Peter Venkman sketched on it, and it was used for one of the episodes, so I think it's really cool to own something like that. Kind of a little piece of cartoon history. So I think it's very important that we preserve these drawings because, back in the old days, when you did animation, you had to draw everything by hand. So to own that, it's a big privilege. And I also own a autographed picture of the actor, and I got to meet him in person too. His name is Stephen Tash, and I got to meet him at the Chicago Flashback Weekend, which is a horror convention. I got to go there this past August, and it's now one of my favorite conventions to go to. I love anything horror related. I love scary movies, and a good portion of movies I've covered on this podcast before have been slasher horror movies, so I love talking about those. Anyway, Steven was an awesome guy to chat with, and the reason why he was a guest at last year's convention was because he was in the movie Christine. They had him and two other actors. The three of them played the bullies that Christine kills in the movie. And I got to get a picture with the three of them standing in front of Christine. And last year was that movie's 40th anniversary, so that was a nice little treat to get to celebrate the not 30. Last year was the 40th anniversary of Christine, and it was a great honor to get a picture of those three guys in front of the car to celebrate 40 years. Because as far as I'm concerned, Christine is one of the greatest scary movies ever made. It's a classic, and of course it was great. It was directed by the legendary John Carpenter. His films are always cool. But it was really cool to meet him. And getting back to Ghostbusters, Steven played a student at the beginning of the movie where Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray, was doing this shock test with him and this other female student. And if you remember, in that scene, the guy kept getting the card right. So Peter was doing this test where he had both the students hooked up to a shock machine, and he was holding up cards, and each one had to take a turn to guess what it was. And Steven's character kept getting the cards right, but Peter kept shocking him anyways, and the girl kept getting the cards wrong, but Peter didn't shock her. And it went on for a little bit, and the student gets angry, and he storms out of the room, and that was Steven's only scene in the movie, but I got to get a picture of him in that scene, and it's autographed by him, and he wrote, what do you think, Christian? How about square? Or it was something like that, in reference to his line in the scene, because he guessed square and he got it right. But anyway, he was a super nice guy to chat with, and I'm honored that I got to meet him. Super nice guy. So I have that in my collection as well. And I do have a Ghostbusters poster in my bedroom, and I also own the Lego Ideas Ghostbusters set. It came out back in I'm going to say 2018, 2017, something like that. And it was the Ghostbusters Ecto 1 with the 4 Ghostbusters. And I currently have it in my room. And it's one of the greatest Lego sets ever made. And I also have their Back to the Future set too. And so yeah, Lego Ideas, I would highly recommend you go check them out. They make custom Lego sets, and they are amazing. You can go on the Lego Ideas website, and you can vote on current sets, because one of the first things that those ideas have to go through. So you can post your own Lego set idea, but it needs to be very detailed, and it has to hit 10,000 votes in order for it to move on to the next stage. There's multiple different stages, but one of the first ones, the set has to get to at least 10,000 votes before it can move on. So Lego Ideas, it's a great company. They make very good Lego sets. But anyway, back to Ghostbusters. And one last thing I want to talk about regarding me and my Ghostbusters history, one that I really want to sock myself in the head for, is that I almost got to meet Ernie Hudson, who played Winston Zeddemore, who was the 4th Ghostbuster. In 2019, I got to go to the St. Louis Fan Expo, and that was the last year I was able to go, because, the following year, COVID happened. But in 2019, I went to that convention for the 4th time. It was a little disappointing because the guest list wasn't that good that year. But they had one amazing guest, and I didn't get a picture with them because at the time, I wasn't back into Ghostbusters yet. It wasn't until I saw Ghostbusters Afterlife that it made me a fan again. But in 2019, I went to that convention. Ernie Hudson was there. I actually remember walking by his booth, and he was right there signing autographs and chatting. And I just wish I could go back to that moment and purchase a picture with him. I really regret not doing that, and I hope I get a chance, down the road to meet him or one of the Ghostbusters again. But yeah, I'm just so angry that I didn't take that opportunity to get to meet him, but I'm hoping I'll get a chance again someday. So before we go any further, the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is that we had Ghostbusters 1 and 2, but we necessarily never got a Ghostbusters 3, and there's a lot of things that played a part in why Ghostbusters 3 never happened. One of the main reasons was because Bill Murray, who plays Peter Venkman, I think back then, I don't think he was too keen on doing sequels for Ghostbusters. I think he wanted it to be a one-time thing and done. I heard he did not want to do Ghostbusters 2 at all. And when it was time to do 3, he wanted nothing to do with it. So I think that alone was like, well, we can't make this movie without him. Like, how are we going to make that work? And the script for Ghostbusters 3 went through like several writing changes and writing teams over a period of like over 2 decades. Like Ghostbusters 3 was planned to come out back in 1991. Then they tried making it again in 1997, but it just didn't go anywhere. And it didn't help the fact that at the time, Bill Murray and the late great Harold Ramis, who plays Egon Spengler, and he helped write the Ghostbusters script with Dan Aykroyd, who plays Ray. And Bill Murray and Harold Ramis had a falling out, which I'll talk about more later. But in the late 90s, they wanted nothing to do with each other, so there was no way they were going to be able to make a third Ghostbusters movie at that time. But thankfully, we theoretically did get a third installment in the form of a video game. So in 2009, Ghostbusters the video game was released. And it's a very story-driven game. All the actors came back to voice themselves for it. And it used the script that Dan Aykroyd had written for Ghostbusters 3. And when he was being interviewed back in 2009, when the game came out, he did state that the game is the third installment. So theoretically, we did get a Ghostbusters 3 just in the form of a video game. And I still have not played it yet. And I need to do that at some point. It looks really good. And the game did get a remaster for the PS4 back in 2014. So, at some point, I will play it. And now the next thing I wanted to talk about is we're going to go back in time about 5 years ago to 2019 when the very first teaser dropped for Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, this teaser alone really did set the mood. I remember watching it for the very first time when the original music started playing, like the hairs on my arms stood up. And I remember all that teaser was a camera panning over a field, and it pans inside a barn, and we just see purple lightning shooting out through the barn, and then wind shows up, and it blows the covers off this vehicle, and it was Ecto-1. And then it cuts to 2020 dropping on the screen, and it actually really did hype me up. And then not long after, we got our first trailer, and due to COVID, Ghostbusters Afterlife had to be pushed to a release of 2021. It was supposed to come out in 2020, but COVID happened. Every theater across the U.S. was shut down, so there was no way. And the following year, the movie was released, but before that, we had a couple of trailers. And the very first one really got me hyped. And the reason why I wanted to talk about the first trailer is that I just think it was kind of funny. Like, literally, the first line of dialogue for the trailer was pretty funny. Because that first trailer's job was to erase the 2016 all-female Ghostbusters film. Now, I think I can say for a good amount of the Ghostbusters fandom when I say we did not like the 2016 reboot. And it's not because it was all female. That was not the problem. It's just that the writing for the film just did not make any sense. And rebooting a very popular franchise with an all-female cast just doesn't seem like a very good idea to me. And my best friend Jonathan, who has been on the show before, him and I covered Godzilla in 1954. I'm planning on having him back on the show real soon to talk about an anime that him and I are a huge fan of. And we were really wanting to cover the brand new Godzilla film that just came out recently called Godzilla -1. But anyway, he told me that he tried watching the 2016 female reboot. He said he got like 5 minutes in and he had to turn it off because it was very, very bad. And the actress they picked just didn't seem to fit the parts of the characters they were portraying. And the writing for it just didn't make any sense. The jokes were cringeworthy, and the story was just all over the place. The film lost millions of dollars at the box office back in 2016. It was bad. And I thought it was also kind of funny that a year or two ago, a Ghostbusters box set was released, and it cut the 2016 Ghostbusters film. And literally the director for the 2016 film literally went on Twitter, complaining about how, like, he was angry that his movie wasn't included in the box set. Then it's like at the last minute they added in like this little slip inside the box set. It was like a barcode to use to get the film digitally, but the box set did not come with a physical copy of the 2016 film. It was just Ghostbusters 1, 2, and Afterlife. And I just think it's pretty funny how, like, literally the first trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife erases that movie just with the first line of dialogue from Paul Rudd's character stating that there hasn't been a ghost sighting in 30 years. I just thought it was kind of funny that literally that first trailer's task was to erase that movie. Then we got a few trailers after that, and I gotta be honest, it hyped me up. I was very excited to see Ghostbusters Afterlife. Those trailers alone made me kind of a fan again, a little bit. So, Ghostbusters Afterlife was released on November 19th, 2021. My family and I, my little brother, little sister, me, and my parents, we all went to the theater to see it. And I'm so happy that we got to go see this together. Getting to experience this movie on the big screen was an absolute treat. We all had a great time, and I'm so thankful I got to see this in theaters. It was a great movie, and I don't have a whole lot of negative points to discuss regarding the film, but we'll get to that. So my family and I went to the AMC theater in Mattoon. We really like to go there because I like their design for their theater rooms. It's pretty cool. I like AMC theaters, I really do. It's a great company. Although I think their popcorn and snacks and drinks are ridiculously overpriced. Like, my family and I literally have this rule. If we ever plan to go see a movie at the AMC theater, we go out and eat beforehand before going into the theater. Because their tickets alone are pricey enough. And getting a soft drink, popcorn, and some candy along with it, you're looking at over $20 at least, just for like one person. And that's ludicrous to me. So we never get anything out of their inventory when we go there. We just get the tickets, we go watch the movie, and that's it. It's a good little tactic if you want to save yourself some money. So Ghostbusters Afterlife is directed by Jason Reitman and his dad, Ivan Reitman, the late great Ivan Reitman. He directed Ghostbusters 1 and 2. And this movie had a budget of only $75 million. And this movie went on to gross $204.3 million at the box office. So this movie was a really great success. So it was set in stone that we were going to get a sequel at some point. And Frozen Empire is looking very promising. I'm very excited to see it in a couple of days. I've heard nothing but great things about it, and there's a couple of Ghostbuster fan pages that I follow on Facebook, and the most posts I've seen so far has been fans constantly praising the film. But there has been a quite a bit of, quote, film critics saying the film is not that good, giving it a very low rating. But my rule is, go see the movie for yourself. Like, don't listen to these film critics. Like, personally, I don't like film critics. I find them to be extremely negative and don't give anything a chance because they set out these ridiculous standards that are impossible to reach. Like, how are you supposed to enjoy a movie? Like, shouldn't you go enjoy a movie for what it is and just have fun? I thought that was the whole point. But anyway, I don't listen to these film critics. Like, go see the movie for yourself. The fact that we're still getting brand new Ghostbusters films in the modern age is nothing short of a miracle. So go out and support this movie because I want more sequels. I want more. Please, give me more Ghostbuster films. I'll happily go watch them. Trust me. So, now we're going to move on to the cast for a minute. And if I do butcher some of these names, I do apologize. So, up first on the cast list. So, there's a lot of cast members in this movie, but I'm only going to be naming off really the main characters of the movie. So, we have McKenna Grace, and she's a very big upcoming actress right now. She's only 17 years old, and she's been in a good amount of stuff. So, just to name off a few of her projects that she's been involved in, she was in the movie Gifted, which is a movie I've really been wanting to watch. It came out in 2017, and it stars her and Chris Evans. She was in, obviously, Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021, and she's made a good amount of appearances on the current popular TV show Young Sheldon, which I believe is getting ready to air its final season. She was in a movie called The Bad Seed. Then she was in The Bad Seed Returns, and it seems she also made an appearance in the sequel show to Fuller House, which ran from 2016 to 2020. Next on the cast list, we have Finn Wolfhard, who is another big upcoming actor, and he has a lot of projects under his belt as well. He's been in quite a bit of awesome stuff recently, and I've seen him in other projects other than Ghostbusters. He plays Mike in the big hit TV show Stranger Things, which is currently filming its 5th and final season. I'm a huge Stranger Things fan, and I need to cover that show some point in the podcast. I'll get around to it eventually. But besides Stranger Things, he also was in the movie It, and he also made an appearance in It Part 2. And of course, he's in Ghostbusters Afterlife and Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel called Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So he's already making quite a bit of appearances in horror-ish projects. So yeah, he's got a good career going for himself, and I hope it continues to get better. And let's see here. Up next on the actor list, we have an actor named Logan Kim. His current claim to fame right now is that he was in Ghostbusters Afterlife as the character named Podcast, and he's returning to play the character again in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and he's also made an appearance in the brand new Walking Dead spin-off show called Walking Dead Dead City, and those are his only claims to fame at the moment, but I have no doubt he will get future projects for himself, and I think he will be a big upcoming actor. And I really enjoy his character Podcast in Ghostbusters Afterlife. He's a very funny character. And now we have an actress named Carrie Coon. She has starred in projects like The Gilded Age, The Nest, The Leftovers, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Gone Girl, Boston Straggler, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and a show called The Sinner. So she has a good amount of projects that she's been involved in, and I will talk about her character later on in the recording. And now we have another young actress who was just in that new Spider-Man-ish movie that just came out called Madam Web, and this actress's name is Celeste O'Connor, and like I said, she was in Madam Web, and she's been in a few other projects as well. She has starred in, let's see, she was in Ghostbusters Afterlife, of course, and she was in other films like A Good Person, The In-Between, Freaky, and Wetlands, and Irreplaceable You, just to name a few other things that she's in. And I'm very excited to see her reprise her character in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And then we have Paul Rudd. Now, Paul Rudd needs no introduction. We all know Paul Rudd. He's a very famous, comedian-ish actor. And he's been in a lot of great movies, too. Like Anchorman. Like, come on, man. Anchorman, it's a classic. And that movie's 20 years old this year. I cannot believe that. He, of course, plays Ant-Man. He also made appearances in Clueless, This Is 40, the Ant-Man trilogy, just to name a few projects. Like, he's had a very good film career. And part of me is convinced that this man is a vampire because Paul Rudd does not age, like, at all. If you look up pictures of him from, like, 20 years ago, he looks exactly the same. And his current age, like, the guy is 54 years old, and if I took one look at him, I would guess he was like, I don't know, 40, 41. He does not look like he's in his mid-50s, like, at all. Like, that is crazy. But I love his character in Ghostbusters Afterlife. And his character's name is Mr. Grubison is his name. And he was one of the best new characters that Ghostbusters Afterlife introduced. And he was one of the best parts of the movie. I really loved his character. And now we're getting into the more familiar faces that we all know. Of course, is Dan Aykroyd. Now, I am a huge fan of Dan Aykroyd. I love his projects and the movies that he's been involved in. And he has Asperger's, so I think I can relate to him about being on the spectrum. I have high functioning autism and ADHD, so I relate a lot to him. And I really grew up with Dan Aykroyd. I mean, this guy has had a legendary career. I mean, the Blues Brothers, the original Ghostbuster films, Trading Places, Coneheads, My Girl, his cameo in Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, The Great Outdoors, Christmas with the Cranks. I mean, how many more do I need to name? Like, he's had a very great career, and I love his movies. And I would love to get a chance to meet him someday. And now we have Bill Murray, yet again, another icon. I mean, like, Bill Murray needs no introduction as well. He has had a very legendary film career, and the films that he's been a part of, like, I don't even think I need to name that many. We all know Bill Murray, but I'll name some anyway. So we have Groundhog Day, the original Ghostbusters, Lost in Translation, Caddyshack, Scrooged, and then Ghostbusters 1 and 2. I mean, come on. Classics, man. Classics. Stripes, his cameo in Zombieland, just to name another. And then we have Ernie Hudson. And Ernie Hudson's character he gets a lot more to do in Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it looks like he gets more to do in Frozen Empire. But I'll get more into Winston's character here in a minute. But Ernie Hudson, he's a fantastic actor as well. Yet another guy. I just want to ask him, like, dude, what's the trick? Now, keep in mind, this man is currently 78 years old, and if you look at him, the dude looks like he's in his mid-50s. I'm like, dude, how do you look that good in shape? Like, he has a full set of... His hair is still black. You know, it's still colored. Barely any gray in his hair. Like, he looks great. I'm like, dude, what's the key? How do you look like that? You're pushing 80. Like, and you look incredible, dude. But yeah, like, Ernie Hudson, man, he looks great for his age. And of course, he's been in all four. He's been in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Frozen Empire. He was in the movie called, he was in a show called Quantum Leap. He also played a police officer in the classic film The Crow, which is turning 30 years old this year. And then we have Annie Potts, who we all know. She plays Janine, who answers the Ghostbuster phone calls. And she's been in quite a few projects herself. She is currently a regular on the show Young Sheldon, funny enough. And she was also in a TV show called Designing Women, which aired from 1986 to 1993. She also starred in a movie in 1978 called Corvette Summer alongside Mark Hamill. She also was in Pretty in Pink, which came out in 1986. She was in Ghostbusters 1 and 2 and Afterlife, and now Frozen Empire. She apparently voiced a character in Toy Story 4. So she's had a lot of good projects, and she is continuing to make a big name for herself. And lastly, we have the late, great Harold Ramis, who plays Egon Spangler, who is my favorite Ghostbuster. Harold Ramis sadly passed away 10 years ago this year. He was an actor, writer, and director, and he was a great guy. I really wish I could have gotten a chance to meet Harold Ramis. And he was born on November 21st, 1944 in Chicago, Illinois, and he passed away on February 24th, 2014 at the age of 69 years old. And he had an autoimmune disease, and I think it took his life pretty quickly. And he directed Groundhog Day, and he helped write the script for Ghostbusters with Dan Aykroyd. And Ghostbusters Afterlife is really a big tribute to him, and I'll get more into that later. He also was involved in writing the screenplay for, like, Stripes. He also was he was also involved in other projects, and I'll get more into that later. But he did play Egon Spangler in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and he voiced himself in the Ghostbusters video game that I mentioned earlier. And that's really about them as far as the main cast goes. And now we're going to get into the plot for Ghostbusters Afterlife. So the plot reads like this. When a single mother and her two children move to a new town, they soon discover they have a connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. Now that's a very great plot. Like, this movie does a fantastic job of bringing the Ghostbusters legacy back to life, and really that's what this film was tasked with. Like, you have a franchise that's basically been dead in the water for over 30 plus years as of 2019 when as of 2021 when Afterlife was released. The franchise had been dead since 1989, so this film had the task having to bring the franchise back to life and honor Harold Ramis. And this film did it in flying colors. Like, this movie made me a Ghostbusters fan again. Like, I started watching the first two films again. This movie paid the biggest respect to what came before. It honored the Ghostbusters legacy. I loved this movie a lot. I was happy to revisit my childhood again with this film, and I was so honored I got to see it on the big screen. And to get back to Harold Ramis, this movie is the ultimate tribute to him. And Egon Spengler is my favorite Ghostbuster. And Harold was an actor and writer and director. Like I said, he helped with Ghostbusters with Dan Aykroyd. He directed Groundhog Day. He helped write the screenplay for Stripes. He directed Caddyshack, and he helped write the screenplay for Animal House as well. As I mentioned earlier in the recording, Harold and Bill Murray were friends in real life, but during the filming of Groundhog Day, their friendship fell apart, and nobody really knows like what led to their friendship falling apart. Like, we honestly don't know the official cause of why they had a falling out. And thankfully, though, Bill Murray and Harold Ramis reconnected. Bill paid Harold a visit not long before he passed away, and they patched things up. So I'm very happy that Harold lived long enough for them to rekindle their friendship and remember the good times that they had. And something else that I thought was really funny about this movie was the Stranger Things elements, considering the fact that Finn Wolfhard's in this. So he plays Mike in Stranger Things, and there's literally an episode in season 2 where Mike and his 3 other friends, they dress up in Ghostbuster costumes for the Halloween of 1984, because that was the year Ghostbusters came out. So I thought it was pretty funny that Mike's dream became a reality in a funny way. So I really enjoyed that. And this movie does have a lot of Stranger Things elements in there of, you know, our main characters are a small group of kids who are uncovering the Ghostbusters legacy and helping bring it back to life. And I was okay with that. Like, Stranger Things, as of right now, I think it's like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer-esque show of this generation. Like, this show took over the world very quickly, and it's like one of the top TV shows ever made. I binged all 4 seasons like last year, and it's a fantastic show, and I'm very excited to see the 5th and final season. And now we're going to get into the elements of the film, of what I like and didn't like. But there's a few things I want to talk about first. So the opening sequence, they had an actor named Oliver Cooper who was a stand-in for Harold Ramis. So during the opening sequence, we see Egon Spengler being played by Oliver. And what they do is they play with the shadows and lighting to kind of hide Oliver, because from a distance, it looks like you're looking at Harold Ramis' Egon Spengler. And the movie opens up with Egon fighting ghosts and trying to trap Gozer the Gozerian again. And unfortunately, his trap that he designed fails, and he has to retreat back inside his house. And unfortunately, the ghosts kill him. And he sacrificed himself to keep a ghost captured inside a ghost trap that he hides in the floor of his house. Now, obviously, I can't think of any other way for the movie to open. They obviously had to kill off Egon because, you know, Harold has sadly passed away. But I think they did a good job with Egon's death because he went out like a true Ghostbuster. Like he went out, guns blazing, like he went out swinging, fighting till the very end. But this film does a very good job. Like you feel Egon's presence throughout the entire movie, and because his ghost is a main character of the movie, and I'll get more into that later on in the recording. Now, one of the things about the story that I was kind of confused on, and I still cannot make heads or tails with this, is the character that Carrie Coon plays, and her character's name is Callie, and she is the daughter of Egon Spangler, and she is the mother of her two children, who are the main characters of this movie, Phoebe Spangler and Trevor. And Phoebe's played by McKenna, and Trevor's played by Finn. And anyway, I don't understand, like, when did Egon have a daughter? Because Callie is not mentioned once in the previous, two movies and the video game. There was no indication whatsoever that Egon had a child. And if you watch the movies or play the game, you can tell he wasn't really interested in women at all. Like, his character, he was always focused on his work and inventing things. He never seemed interested in women. Like, even when Jeanette made any moves towards him in the first film, he would, like, hug her a few times and stuff. But really, that was about it. And, you could just tell he wasn't really interested in any, like, relationships with women. Like, he was focused on work. So, when did he have a daughter? That was the one thing I don't understand. It's like, when in the timeline, like, did he have, like, a one-night stand with a girl at college or something? Like, I don't know. But he clearly knows that she exists because we find out later in the film, in his underground laboratory, he has a billboard. Not a billboard. He has this area of photographs all mashed together of Callie when she was a baby all the way through her life. And, like, he clearly knew that she existed, yet there's no mention of her in the previous installments. So that was one of the things about the story. I was kind of like, where did she come from? But, I mean, honestly, it's not a big deal. I think it works. I mean, the writing for it, I was kind of like, okay, when did he have a daughter? But I can look past it. I think it was the best way to introduce the next generation of Ghostbusters. So I don't think it's a big deal. I just kind of wish they could have did a better job of explaining, like, who she is. Like, we don't even know who the mother is that gave birth to Callie. Like, her name wasn't mentioned at all. Like, there were theories going around when the first trailer dropped that Janine was the mother of Callie, but that's false. We now know that rumor isn't true. So again, who was Egon with, who he had a daughter with? Like, we don't know, and I'm not sure if that's going to get addressed in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire either, but maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know much about the movie, and I want to keep it that way because I want this movie to be a complete surprise. But anyway, that's just a little thing about the story that I just wasn't 100% on board with because it just felt kind of shoehorned in and out of nowhere. But I mean, it still kind of works, so I'll look past it. And I really enjoyed the new characters that they introduced. So the new characters are Trevor, and my favorite character is Phoebe. She is the best character in this film. She's literally a mini Egon Spangler. She has the black curly hair, wears the glasses. She's huge into science and work and building things. Like, she is literally a tiny Egon, and it's adorable. And then we have Podcast, awesome character. And then we have Lucky, she's pretty cool. And Mr. Grubitson, like I mentioned earlier, played by Paul Rudd. Fantastic new characters that they work for this movie perfectly. And I really did enjoy the story for this film, like the mystery, the legacy, the passing of the torch, bringing Ghostbusters back to life. I mean, this film just did such an amazing job of honoring its previous installments. A lot of franchises today don't get this same treatment, so it's a nice change of pace to finally see a film honor what came before instead of destroying it. So now we're going to get into my favorite scenes of this movie. Now, the first one I want to talk about is Phoebe finding Egon's lab. So we have this beautiful scene in the movie where Ghost Egon communicates with Phoebe, and he leads her to his underground laboratory. And funny enough, she uses a pole to slide down into the lab, just like you would at the Ghostbusters firehouse. And Ghost Egon leads her to a proton pack for her to fix up, and he gets out all the tools for her to fix it up and everything, and he teaches her how to fix it. It was such an adorable moment, and one of my favorite things is that you can really feel Egon's presence, because there's literally a scene where she's like, "How did you figure out how to make this device so small?" And then like Egon grabs a light and aims it at one of the walls in the basement, and it's just filled with college diplomas and certificates that he got. And then Phoebe's just like, "Okay, I get it. You're a genius," you know? And that's just kind of funny because Harold Ramis in real life had a big sense of humor, so I'm very happy they found a way for Ghost Egon to express his funny side without having to say anything. Just a nice little gesture, you know? But that whole laboratory set was so cool. Like, it really felt like you were in the Ghostbusters firehouse. Like, that whole laboratory set was so cool. And you could just tell, like, you can just imagine the hundreds of hours Egon had spent in that lab for the 30 plus years prepping to defeat Gozer again. And the next scene that I absolutely loved was when Trevor found Ecto-1 locked up in a barn. So we have this cool scene of Trevor finding Ecto-1. Then later on in the film, he fixes up the vehicle because there's an aspect of Trevor where he likes fixing up old vehicles. He's kind of the engineer guy. He loves working on vehicles, and I love the scene where he fixes up Ecto-1, and then Ghost Egon shows up and does one last finishing touch for the car to work again, and then Trevor takes the car out for a spin out in this field, and he's just like doing tight turns with it, just having an absolute blast. I feel like that whole scene is just like everybody's daydream if they got a chance to drive Ecto-1. Like, Trevor is living out like every Ghostbusters fan dream of getting to cruise around in Ecto-1. Brilliant scene. Then the next scene that I enjoyed so much was the car chase. So we had this beautiful scene of Trevor, Phoebe, and Podcast driving through the town of Somerville chasing a ghost in Ecto-1, and you find out that during the time frame between the Ghostbusters game to now, the Ghostbusters game takes place in 1991, by the way, just want to let you know. Anyway, between 1991 to 2021, the Ghostbusters had installed a new feature in Ecto-1, which was a gunner seat. So Phoebe's sitting outside of the car in the gunner seat, trying to capture the ghost with her proton pack. Meanwhile, she's damaging every building they drive by, causing probably thousands of dollars of property damage. And Trevor's driving the car, and then Podcast is operating another new feature that's introduced in this film, but it's a ghost trap strapped to a remote controlled little car that Podcast is controlling, trying to drive it underneath the ghost and capture it. And you have like classic Ghostbusters music playing, and I like this little detail. The ghost breaks a fire hydrant, and water starts gushing out of it. And when the kids drive the Ecto-1 by it, it sprays water on Ecto-1, and it washes the dirt off the Ghostbusters logo on Ecto-1. You know, it's kind of symbolizing that the Ghostbusters are back. And the car chase goes all the way out to the outskirts of the city, out in the fields, and they finally manage to capture the ghost. And it was such a cool little moment. It gave off some serious Fast and Furious vibes. Like, Trevor is like pushing Ecto-1 to its like absolute maximum. I mean, the guy accidentally did a Dukes of Hazzard jump kinda with the car earlier when he was driving it through the fields. Like, he is pushing this. Like, this is the late 60s Cadillac, you know, like, and he's pushing it to the max. I like to imagine, like, my gosh, the body work of that car is like hanging on by a thread. Like, that car is being pushed to the max. But anyway, still an amazing scene nonetheless. And the scene that got me very emotional was when the kids got in trouble and they were locked up in jail. Phoebe was given one chance to make a phone call. And earlier on in the film, she was watching the original Ghostbusters commercial that they did in front of the firehouse. And because she looked it up on YouTube and she wrote down the Ghostbusters phone number. And when she gets a chance to make a phone call, she uses the phone number, and lo and behold, who picks up the phone but Ray at his bookstore in New York City. And they talk back and forth, and then Phoebe informs Ray that Egon passed away, and you find out that Egon and Ray had a falling out. They didn't like each other anymore. Like, Ray literally says, the minute Egon's name is mentioned, Ray says, Egon Spangler can rot in hell. And you're all just thinking, wait, what? You guys were friends. Which is what Phoebe says, pretty much. And then Ray was like, that was a long time ago. And then, then Ray gets all sad and emotional when he finds out that Egon died. Then he starts going through this exposition explaining, like, what happened to the Ghostbusters after 1991. And he talks about that they did their job too well. Ghost sightings went down the drain, and they couldn't keep up their mortgage, and it led to their company being shut down. And Egon ended up taking Ecto 1 and all the Ghostbusters equipment with him because none of the other guys believed him that Gozer was going to return again. So he took all the gear with him. And because of this, Ray, Winston, and Peter had to go find new lines of work. And Ray never forgave Egon for what he did. So they had a falling out with their friendship. And then right before the call ends, Phoebe mentions to Ray that Egon Spangler was her grandfather, and then the phone gets hung up, and then Ray sits there in disbelief, trying to think of what to do. That whole scene really hits you in the feels, because, it's Ray. Like, he's the heart of the Ghostbuster. Egon was the brains, and Peter just kept it cool. And in the words of Winston Zeddemore, he says he was the, quote, sex appeal. That's what he says in the Ghostbusters Afterlife post-credits scene. I thought it was pretty funny. But anyway, another scene I really enjoyed was when we find out that Mr. Grubison is kind of a scientist himself, because he is a teacher at the Somerville school, and he doesn't teach the kids, like, literally anything. I think it was pretty funny. Like, he just strolls in this car with a late 90s square TV on top of it, with a VHS VCR player, and he literally plays the movie Cujo for the kids, and then later on in the film he plays them one of the Chucky movies, and this tiny earthquake starts happening, and he goes into his back office to check the data on the earthquake, and then Phoebe walks in. And then Gruberson and her start, bonding over science. And he's trying to explain to Phoebe that he can't pinpoint what's causing the earthquakes. And the classroom scene where later on in the film, Phoebe finds that Ghostbusters trap in the house. And she brings it to the school. And Mr. Gruberson explains to her this is a Ghostbusters trap. Then he looks up on YouTube and he shows her in podcast the footage of the Ghostbusters showing up to the building in New York City during the end of the first movie to fight Gozer, and explain to him, who Ghostbusters were. And that was when Phoebe finally figured out that their grandfather was Egon Spangler. And then, going back to the scene that I mentioned earlier about Phoebe fixing up that proton pack in Egon's laboratory, her and podcast take the proton pack out for a test run out in this empty field, and Phoebe absolutely destroys her target very accurately. And getting to hear the sound effects of the proton pack being turned on and used, it's one of those, like, oddly satisfying sounds that I love. Like, the sound effects for the proton pack are some of my favorite uses of sound effects for any kind of weapon in sci-fi or in scary movies. I love the sound effects of the proton pack. I mean, and Winston even says later on in the film when him and the OG show up, when they turn on their proton packs, he's just like, man, I love that sound. I'm just like, yep, me too, dude. And another thing I really enjoyed was the Dana cameo. So Dana Barrett, who was played by Sigourney Weaver, she is a main character in Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Sigourney did get a chance to be in the Ghostbusters video game. She regrets not starring in it, but she comes back in a cameo during one of the after credits scenes, and it confirms that her and Peter are still married to this very day. They have a happy marriage, and it was a kind of little funny reference because she has Peter hooked up to the shocker, and she's doing the card test with him, and he keeps getting every card right. Then she asks him, "Did you mark the cards?" Then Peter's like, No, I didn't." Then she shocks him. She's like, You marked the cards, didn't you?" And he's like, "Yep." I just thought it was so cool, getting to see that they have a happy marriage going for themselves. And that made me really happy that they found a way for her to be part of the film. I really wish that Dana could have had a bigger part in this movie, but it seems that she's not going to be in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which makes me sad, because they actually had ideas for her to be a Ghostbuster in Ghostbusters 3, but sadly we may not ever get to see that become a reality. But still, I was very happy with that cameo. It made me happy. I'm always happy to see Sigourney Weaver on the big screen. Huge fan. She will always be Ellen Ripley to me. And let's see here. Oh man, this has to be my favorite scene in the entire movie, the ending battle. The ending battle for Ghostbusters Afterlife is one of the greatest conclusions I think I've ever seen to any movie in my life. It was so perfect. Like, there's nothing negative about the ending battle at all. The way they did this was so respectful. It was done so classy. Like, there are so many words I could use to describe this. It's one of those things, like, you need to see it for yourself to understand how epic it is. So I'll set the scene. So the kids have rescued their mom because Mr. Grubison and Phoebe and Trevor's mom have been possessed by the two dogs, and Gozer has been brought back to life, and the kids managed to get the ghost out of their mom, and they're driving away back to the farm in Ecto 1, and the other dog is chasing them, and they figure out that Egon designed the farm property to be a giant Ghostbuster trap. So they lead Gozer and the other dog spirit back to the property and try to capture it. But then they started winning there for a little bit, but then the trap malfunctions again, and the kids are getting ready to lose, and then out of nowhere, the original Ghostbusters show up in uniform, proton packs armed and ready to go. We see Peter, Ray, and Winston standing there, and I'm telling you right now, man, in the theater, the minute when we heard Peter's voice yell out, "Hey, Flat Top, have you missed us?" Like, dude, I wanted to get up and start screaming. Like, I'm literally seeing three heroes from my childhood again on the big screen. Like, what do you say? I was so happy in that moment. Like, the feeling, like my childhood came rushing back. It is such a beautiful moment. And then the Ghostbusters try to defeat Gozer, but they end up losing too. But then during that, Phoebe managed to get up and get a proton pack on. Then she starts having her own battle with Gozer, and she's starting to lose. But then a ghost head appears out of frame and grabs the proton pack to help out Phoebe, and it's Egon. We finally get to see him come back in full ghost form, and he helps Phoebe, and he helps move her over with the other Ghostbusters, and all four proton packs start shooting at Gozer, and they finally manage to trap her. And it was the perfect moment of the original team passing the torch to the next generation. Because, you have Ghost Egon, helping Phoebe with her pack, symbolizing the transition. And my favorite shot was when we got to see the 4 original Ghostbusters, the 4 of them standing together as a whole for one last battle. And it is such a beautiful shot, and I love the detail of the 3 of them looking over and seeing Ghost Egon. They're all just looking at him like, what the heck, It is such a beautiful moment to see the original team all together one last time. It was the ultimate respect to the original team, and it was such a beautiful scene. And I can just imagine wherever Harold Ramis is, that he had a huge smile on his face. They did a great job bringing him back, and they actually did get permission from his family to bring him back. So the bring back Egon, what they did was they had another actor stand in for him, and the actor who stood in for him during the ending battle, his name was Bob Gunton, and you may recognize him because he played the warden in Shawshank Redemption. And what they did was they had him dressed up in a Ghostbusters uniform, and they styled, I think they gave him like a wig to wear that looked like Egon's hair, and it was all white, of course, and they put these little green dots all over his face, and they were able to restructure Egon's face, or Harold Ramis's face, over his. And for the CG scenes of bringing back Egon, they took a CG designed Egon that they put together using scenes of Harold Ramis from Ghostbusters 1 and 2. They made him how he looked in the original 2 films. Then they aged him up to make him look like how he would look now if he was still alive. And they kept him thin. Towards the end of Harold Ramis's life, he did gain a lot of weight. But they didn't do that for him in this scene. They made him look like, okay, what would Egon look like now 30 years? Because Egon was thin. So they kept Harold thin, and they just made him look how he would look now if he was still alive, if he kept his longer hair. And they did a great job. I mean, the effects, they did it with the utmost respect, and the family gave the team permission to do that. And they did the best job because there's been a lot of times where movies had to use CGI to bring back dead actors, and I have mixed feelings about that. Like, they had to do it for Fast and Furious 7 because sadly Paul Walker passed away. And then they did it again to bring back the actor who played Tarkin in Star Wars Rogue One. So I kind of have iffy feelings about it, but in this instance, it was done with the utmost respect, and the family gave them permission. So in this instance, I'm okay with it. But they did an amazing job bringing Egon back for this ending battle, and they made a big creative call of Egon not saying anything, just doing like head nods when the original team talks to him after the ending battle, where Peter says, "I thought you might turn up," and then Ray says, "I'm sorry, I didn't believe you," and then Winston says, "You should have called. I missed you, my friend." And I feel like in that moment, that wasn't the characters talking. I feel like that was the actors like speaking to Harold, like, "Dude, we miss you a lot, man." And it really hits you in the feels. And the other thing that I really enjoyed was saying goodbye to Egon. Like, the ending shot where he gets to meet his grandchildren finally, and his daughter Callie runs up and gives him a hug and realizes that he did not abandon her. Like, he was following her this whole time, like, and he was just out protecting the world from Gozer. He truly loved her and his grandchildren. And I love the ending shot of him, getting to patch things up with his friends. Then his daughter runs up and hugs him, and then he disappears because now he's going on into the, quote, afterlife, because all of his loose ends are tied up. He has no unfinished business, so now he passes on to the other side. And he goes up into the sky, and then the camera pans up into an empty night sky, and all we see is stars. Then we see text pop up on the screen saying, "For Harold." And it hits you in the feels like, I feel like there were a lot of tears in a lot of Ghostbusters' eyes when they saw that text show up on the screen. It was the best way to say goodbye to Harold Ramis because we never really got to say goodbye to him yet. So that was a great homage. And this film did the most excellent job of paying respect to the late great Harold Ramis. And one last scene I really enjoyed was the Janine cameo towards the end of the movie, towards the beginning of the film. Because when Callie and her children first show up to the farm property, Janine was there to greet them because she was the one who spoke with them over the phone, and she was helping Egon, keep up with the money during all the years that he lived at that house. So I guess you could say they kind of maintained a friendship, but we're not 100% sure. But I also really enjoyed the little cameo too. Now we're going to be getting into just a couple of things about the movie that I didn't like, and like I said, there's not that many. There was only a few things about this film that I did not like, and the first one was the scene after the car chase. So after the car chase that I mentioned earlier with Ecto 1. The kids get in big trouble, and then there's a confrontation with Phoebe and her mom, Callie, because Callie has been crap talking her dad the entire film up to this point. Like, from the beginning of the movie up until, she finds that photo collage in the basement, like, she hates her dad with every fiber of her being. She talks negative about Egon throughout the entire film, and it does get really annoying to a point. It's like, Kelly, okay, we get it. You don't like your dad. But she goes out of her way over and over again to crap talk him, and it gets really annoying. And the scene where Phoebe's like, why didn't you tell me that our grandfather was Egon Spangler? Then Kelly just goes on this long monologue saying, because I didn't mean a damn thing to him. And I can tell just by looking around this house, I meant nothing to him, and he was a jerk. And she said harsher words, so I'm not going to say them because I don't want to cuss on this recording. But anyway, she just says all these mean things about him, and I gotta be honest, I disliked Callie throughout a good portion of the movie. It wasn't until towards the very end when she hugs Egon where she got better for me. Like, towards the end of the film, she got a lot better. But a good portion of the film, she just seemed like a very angry, bitter, middle-aged woman who finds any moment she can to sour talk her father. And I just didn't like that very much. She just seemed very negative at certain parts as well. And she could have did a better job of not being so harsh towards her father. But, that's just something about her character that I didn't enjoy very much. Like I said, she got better as the movie progressed. And another small little detail that I wish they'd done, I wish that Janine could have been at the final battle. Like, I had this imagination in my head once the battle's over, when Ghost Egon is saying goodbye to everybody, I like to imagine, like, the camera pans to the farmhouse porch, and then, like, Janine just walks over and she just sees Egon. She has this shocked look on her face and she just says, like, Egon? And then Egon just looks at her and gives her a smile. Like, I really wish that Janine had been involved. Like, I wish she could have been there for a scene like that because she deserved to have, closure with Egon as well because she really cared for Egon, and we see that in the first movie. So again, small little detail I wish. But I mean, they did go out of their way. So another cool thing they did with this movie, there's actually an after credits scene that they used. It's a deleted scene from the original Ghostbusters that has Janine and Egon talking before they go up to the roof of that building to fight Gozer. She gives Egon one of her lucky coins, and then he hugs her before he heads up to the building. So I thought that was really cool that Harold Ramis does actually make an appearance in the movie. So that made up for it, but still, I think Janine should have been at the final battle sequence. But again, just another small little detail I wish they could have added in. But nothing major by any means. Now, these next two things that I want to mention are more story related, just tiny little things. Like, Egon going crazy, like, we find out through the monologue that Ray says to Phoebe over the phone, he says that Egon went a little crazy, saying that the world was going to end and that he didn't keep a level head. And that was one of the things about Egon, like, that didn't seem to fit his character. If you watch him in the first two movies or in the video game, he always keeps a level head. Like, he only has, like, one anger outburst in the first film, and that's it. And I love that little reference that Phoebe inherited Egon's little rage, because we have a scene later on in the film, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But first, Egon going crazy and creeping people out just didn't really seem to fit his character. That just doesn't seem like stuff that he would do. Because like I said, he always stayed calm most of the time, and he always kept a level head. He was the one who always really thought things through. So when Ray said those things about him, that just didn't seem to fit his character. And while we're talking about that, another thing about character, Ray not believing Egon that Gozer was going to come back, that didn't seem to fit Ray's character either, because Ray and Egon would always suspect of danger instantly. Like, Ray took this stuff, like, very seriously, and I feel like if Egon was to say, I think Gozer might come back again, Ray would be the first one to believe him. Like, there would be no doubt. So him not believing Egon, I don't understand that. And Egon freaking him out, it's like Ray took this stuff just as serious as Egon. Like, they both were obsessed with finding spirits. And we see that instantly when they're first introduced in the original Ghostbuster film. So again, two little traits that were done with the characters I didn't necessarily agree with. But again, it's just another small thing that I don't think ruins the movie by any means. And the dog scene was a little cringy. I will admit, there's literally a scene in the film where Gruber is possessed by the ghost dog and the mom is possessed by the other. And then she just walks up to him, and then her clothes changed to that golden dress that Dana was wearing in the original Ghostbusters film. Then possessed Gruber's like, I like your eyes. You know, it's just like, really, that scene could have been cut. It just felt really awkward and just extremely out of place. I really feel like they could have cut that out and it wouldn't have changed anything. It was kind of a small cringy little moment, but thankfully it don't last too long. It's in and out, so I can move past it. And the other thing, one last scene, well, I got a few more. Anyway, the cop scene where Sheriff Domingo ends Phoebe's call with Ray. He literally walks up to her and then clicks the button to end the call. Like, that made me very angry. I didn't like this character at all. And he is Lucky's dad. And the guy just came off as a huge jerk, like crap talking Egon. So in the town of Somerville, he was known as the dirt farmer. And he was known as a huge weirdo to Somerville's community. And you know, it's like, you have this guy's grandchildren standing right here, and you're going to say harmful things about their grandfather? I mean, it's just like, this guy was a jerk any chance he got, and part of me wanted to punch him in the face. Like, he's coming off like such a jerk, but at the same time, I need to understand, like, these children did just cause hundreds, like thousands of dollars of property damage, and the fact that Phoebe didn't kill anybody with her proton pack is nothing short of a miracle. Like, she accidentally aims it at the restaurant building in the theater. Like, she caused a lot of damage, but at the same time, I think the sheriff needs to be a little more respectful. Like, I did not like him at all, and I'm so thankful he's only in the movie for that one scene, because the guy was just a jerk. But and I like that little detail where he made Phoebe so angry she grabs the proton pack, turns it on, and aims it at him. It was just like that scene where Egon snapped at Walter Peck and grabs him and tries to punch him, and the others have to pull him away. So it was a nice little detail to see that Phoebe inherited Egon's, like, short fuse, if you will. Like, she can only be pushed so far before she snaps. So I thought that was a nice little detail, that yet again she is a tiny Spangler, like she's a mini Egon Spangler. And I guess one last thing that I found quite annoying were the other kids that work at the Somerville restaurant that Trevor works at when they move into the city. Like they're barely in the movie. They're in the movie for like 2 scenes and that's it. They're not even like they're just like background characters to tell you the truth. But these kids like go out of their way whenever they can to be bullies toward Trevor, and they just came off extremely annoying. But again, they were just background characters, so they were nothing serious. But like I said, there was just small little things like that were kind of an annoyance, so they didn't like overstay their welcome. But that's really all I have as far as negatives go for Ghostbusters Afterlife. And so at the end of the day, I enjoyed this movie to death. And I guess one last thing I wish they could have added was the Ghostbuster films have these epic intros with the Ghostbusters logo, but we didn't get that in Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I can understand why. Like, they waited to do that at the end of the movie, which I think in this instance does work better. And I wish they could have did the thing they did with the end credits scene. So in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, they did this really cool thing during the credits where they would have, like, footage from the movie playing, and they would show the particular actor in one of their scenes, and then, like, the screen would freeze and their name would pop up next to them. They did that during the credits scenes during the ends of the first 2 films, and I wish they'd done that again for Afterlife just to keep that theme going, but they didn't. But thankfully, people on YouTube have created one, and you can find it on YouTube, and it's really good. Like, I wish they could add that in the movie somehow. But again, teeny tiny little details that I wish they could have did, but it doesn't ruin the movie for me at all. So, like I said, I love this movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'm telling you, go give it a chance. If you love Ghostbusters 1 and 2, you are going to love this film, like I promise you. Ghostbusters Afterlife is an amazing film. Jason Reitman and his team did a magnificent job, and I cannot wait to see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So, the rating I will give Ghostbusters Afterlife is a 8 out of 10. This movie rocks, and I highly recommend you go see it. And I highly recommend you guys go check out Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I've heard nothing but great things about the movie, and I'm very excited to see it this weekend. And I will be covering that film ASAP, so be looking forward to that. So that will mark the end of this recording. I hope you enjoyed this one, and until next time, my name is Christian Taylor, and you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.